Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Elle, for letting some people in that have just been waiting. So I might just wait just a quick minute because I can see we've still got a few different people starting to come in, and then we'll kick things off. And so, Ben, good to see you. Maddie, Kelly, Sue, welcome. Hope everybody's had a good day so far. Ben, just while I've sort of got you quickly with your camera, I think we've been playing a little bit of phone tag maybe, so after looking at time to touch base. If you still
Yes.
need,
Yeah, I was going to touch, but yeah, ringing regarding your email.
yeah, yep,
Was one thing. The other thing's fine.
okay, yep. Well, I'm free after this, so if you want to give me a buzz, or I can give you a buzz later on this afternoon, we can.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Right, we might sort of kick things off just to get it moving along for everybody, and Eloise will sort of keep letting everybody in as we go. And so I'd just like to start by saying welcome to everybody to our second Feeling the Pulse session for 2024. For a few of you that may not know me, my name's Murray Benton, and I work in the Community Housing Futures Program delivery team. So these monthly sessions are a regular learning exchange for community housing providers that focuses on investment and growth activities and also allows briefings and information around the Community Housing Futures Program. These sessions include opportunities to exchange information, as we know, and also can include conversations around certain barriers or challenges that the sector might be facing, and bring those forward for discussion with a solutions focus. It also allows opportunities for us to hear from relevant guest speakers and presenters. And so just before I move through some of the initial slides, there's a quick couple of housekeeping things. So just to let everybody know, again, this session is being recorded for distribution purposes. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat as it's being moderated. And also we hope for a little bit of question and discussion time at the end, so you can also wait until then. So I just begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the various lands on which we're meeting or dialing in from today. For me here in Brisbane, that's the Turrbal and Yuggera people. Please feel free, or you're more than welcome to share your location, country or mob in the chat function, because it'll be really nice to see different areas that people are dialing in from. And I'd also just like to extend my respect to elders past, present and emerging, and also extend that acknowledgement to any First Nations people that may be here with us today. So today's session will start by, or I'll provide everybody with just a brief update on behalf of Alana, the program manager who can't be with us today. And I'll also then briefly introduce our peak partners that are overseeing this program, as they'll be leading some of the discussions around the recently released Homes for Queenslanders plan. And once again, we hope for some time at the end for some discussions. So in terms of the update with the program, the final tranche of round two's business advisory grants have closed, and we plan to advise all of the applicants of their outcome in the coming days. It's been really, really good to see an oversubscription in this round as well, and just shows, I guess, the level of need for a program like this, and the work that we as a delivery team and the peaks have been putting into this, and just also acknowledging the work of the sector, knowing how busy everything is. So Alana, alongside the peaks, have engaged in conversations with government to explore the potential for what an iteration 2 could look like, and that is including in those discussions factors around, whether it be in principle support initially for the program to make sure it continues, but once there's some more clarity around the potential and the scope for this, our plan would be to lock in some more information and then seek to have some broader conversations with the sector around engagement to help inform the iteration 2's proceedings, sort of like what we did with round 1. So let's just watch this space for now. We're also preparing to release dates for a property development masterclass, which is really exciting for us. And so that is specifically designated and designed for community housing providers here in Queensland. We're forecasting that will fall around the end of April, start of May, but we're still just in the final stages of reviewing that. So that'll be something that we'll update everybody in due time. And lastly, just a quick note, and most of you will already know this, that the HUF Housing Australia Future Fund is due to close this Friday on the 22nd of March. And so with how busy things are, once again, thank you all for joining us today. So the Community Housing Futures Program is a collaboration piece, which I'm sure you guys know this now, between our three peak bodies, as you can see here, in collaboration with Queensland Government. We're pleased to welcome our peaks today to discuss the recently released Homes for Queenslanders plan. And so on behalf of the delivery team and everybody here, we'd just like to thank the peaks for the time they're giving us today. And I know I'll hand over to Annemaree briefly just to start sort of some of the presentation on that. But just in case there's anybody here that doesn't know much about these organisations, what I can say in summary is that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Housing Queensland is a non-government peak body that works together with members and partners to eliminate the disparities in housing experienced by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Queensland. And so I believe that we have Mark Francis, the General Manager of Business Development, joining us today on behalf of Neil Wilmot, their CEO. As reference to Annemaree, who's the Executive Officer of CHIA, so Community Housing Industry Association, is the independent industry body representing community housing organisations here in Queensland. And lastly, Q Shelter is a peak body in Queensland working to influence solutions to housing needs and homelessness across an array of influence and sector support mechanisms. And I can see that we've got our Executive Director, Fiona Cornelia, online as well. So just once again, welcome to you three. And so from here, I'm happy to hand this over to Annemaree and then welcome both Fiona and Mark, or Neil if he does by chance end up in the meeting, to sort of lead some of these conversations and then open it up from there. Thanks.
Thanks, Murray. And hi, everyone. I too want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're all meeting on today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to acknowledge that this land was never ceded. So today we're really hoping just to have a conversation with those of you that are online around the Homes Queenslanders plan. So I'm going to just do a bit of scene setting by ripping through some slides that provide a bit of an overview. I'm sure everyone's had plenty of opportunity to have a look at it, but I just thought it would help set the context if I go through a few slides just with the kind of, the key elements of the plan. And then I'm really looking to have some conversation with the people online and some feedback from you about areas of the plan that you're particularly interested in getting more information about, any concerns that you have. I mean, I can provide a little bit of information at the end about our very preliminary conversations between the peaks and the department around the next steps with the plan. But I don't have, I'm not about to unveil a swathe of information that you don't currently have, really looking to kind of understand your response to it, areas that you'd like to have further dialogue about or to get some clarification about that I can and the other peaks can feed that back into the department now in our discussions with them. So there'll be plenty of time for questions and comments and discussion at the end, because I don't intend to spend long talking to you about the slides, because I'm sure you've seen the plan over the recent weeks. So
Annemaree, can I just, sorry, yeah, and I'm happy to sort of be your, can click through the slides as you need. Is your microphone, it's just a little bit quiet for everybody, so I don't know if maybe it can be a bit closer. Oh, that sounds heaps better already. Just to,
sorry.
Yeah, just in case there's others that may not hear it as well, but that's perfect. And yeah, you just let me know with the slides and we can go through as fast or slow as we need.
Thanks, Murray. Yeah, I've never been accused of being quiet, so for those people that know me, that would be a change. So as you know, I've just got to move my screen around. Hang on, because I've got people's views obstructing my. So the plan is a plan to 2046. It's got a really ambitious target of 1 million new homes by then, and 53,500 social homes. The plans has 5 key pillars, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with: more homes, support for Queensland's, help for homeowners, boost for social housing, and towards ending homelessness. So really on the next slide, please, Murray. This is really just a really short summary of the key elements of those 5 pillars. And I'm not going to read it out to you because I'm sure A, you can all read, and B, you're pretty familiar with it. I think what I would say is that even though I want to focus most on the pillar around boosting social housing today, there are things obviously under the other pillars that will be of interest for community housing providers across Queensland, including, for example, in this one, the mandatory housing targets under regional plans, the funding to incentivise the development of new homes in underutilised, near underutilised infrastructure, so some infill there. The new design standards, of course, will be of interest to people that are engaged in development, as will the inclusionary planning pirates. So it's not, and the modern methods of construction. So I think there's lots to unpack in the plan, but really today I was hoping to focus our kind of conversation around the growth in social housing pillar, but happy to take kind of feedback or comments about any of these other pillars as well, where people would like to get more information. Next slide, Murray. So the second pillar is support for renters. As you know, they've talked about introducing a portable bond scheme, which I think is fantastic, but they've also have introduced an interim scheme while they design. It'll take some time to do the design and the implementation of the portable bond scheme. So they've also announced an interim scheme in terms of the bond loans. Next slide, Murray, please. There's some key elements in terms of helping people into home ownership, including working with the federal government on their commitment of the Help to Buy scheme. They're also looking at increasing the eligibility for the Queensland Housing Finance Loan, which I understand is particularly targeted at regional areas. And they're also, I'm not sure I've put it in the slide, but there's an element about helping people in social housing to purchase their homes as well. Next slide, please, Murray. There's been some great news for homelessness services with the increase in funding. They've also extended the critical response team to all regions, extending the existing emergency accommodation, etc., etc. And they've also announced an independent review of the homelessness service system. Next slide, please, Murray. So this is the area that's of particular interest for me and for community housing providers, which is the boost to social housing. So they've got an ambitious target of 53,500 new social homes by 2046. And that is ambitious. They basically would require the delivery of more than 2,000 social homes every year from 2028 onwards. What we do know is that the social housing target's been informed by the Annemaree modelling. There's been a couple of conversations, I've had a couple of conversations, I'm sure the other peaks have as well, about the Annemaree modelling. It hasn't been released at this point, so if you're interested to know the detail of that, I can't share it with you. But we have asked if the modelling will be released. At this stage, what I understand is that some information about the modelling will be released, but to some extent that will be dependent upon Annemaree and Queensland Government agreeing what's made public. As you can read there, there's a commitment to at least half of the new homes meeting design standards for Queenslanders, older Queenslanders, people with a disability. There's extra accommodation, supported accommodation for key target groups. And they talk about a tailored housing response for First Nations people and regional and remote communities. If Neil or Mark is on here, it might be good later on when we get to the discussion if you've got any observations to make, because there wasn't a lot of detail in the plan in relation to First Nations people or disability. There's so keen to know if you know more than I do. The plan identifies a commitment to targeted accommodation for people in need. You will all know this, the new foyers, new or replaced domestic and family violence shelters, a commitment or a target for social homes for First Nations families, etc. Next slide, please, Murray. So in relation to the community housing element of the plan, there's a commitment to partner with community housing providers to deliver housing through the HIF and the Quick Starts is obviously underway, and the Social Housing Accelerator program, as well as the Housing Australia Future Fund. Some of the other areas that are of key interest are the commitment to rent parity. What I can tell you about that is that, for those of you that may not know, is that there's a disparity between the rents that are charged in public and community housing because elements of a tenant's income are not included in the eligible income in calculating rents in community housing. So that disparity has existed for a long time. The peaks have, advocated, and CHIA in particular, I'm aware of, about establishing rent parity between community housing and social and public housing, and it's been a long time in the making, but the commitment's finally here, which I think is a good thing. There's a commitment to longer term 20-year management leases on new social housing leases. Again, not much detail around this. I know people have got questions about whether or not the terms of those longer term leases are going to be negotiable. So I'm keen to hear feedback from other people of questions or concerns or just areas of interest in relation to those longer term leases. You should already be aware that there's been some commitments given to support the purchase of properties exiting the National Rental Affordability Scheme. So I know there's some work happening with particular providers who are still delivering a significant amount of properties under that scheme to give effect to that. We've been talking about a master agreement for a long time now, well before I arrived in this role at CHIA. I think it's coming up to 4 years. So it would be great to see this delivered. And I understand that it's hopefully very close to being finalised and released. I think I've got the leases there twice. There we go, I have. And then the other thing that's of particular interest to me, given all the time I spent at Brisbane Youth Service, is the commitment to a youth subsidy so that more community housing providers can house young people in social housing. Next slide, please, Murray. Or is that the end? That's the end. Excellent.
That's sort of the end to, then open
that's
some
the whistle-stop tour of the new Homes for Queenslander housing plan.
Of course.
What I might do is just tell you some bits and pieces of information that I've gathered since its release. None of it's going to be groundbreaking, but I think it's helpful to know. So in conversation with the department, it's clear that there's still work to do in finalising the detail and working through the implementation of some of these commitments. So, for example, the rent parity one, the youth subsidy, there's still some of these things aren't going to happen overnight, and there's work to be done in finalising the detail and considering the implementation. So the department has indicated that they're keen to engage with the sector in relation to finalising those plans and in particular the implementation. What form that engagement will take is not yet determined, but they are definitely looking to work with the sector on delivering those commitments. I've asked a few questions in relation to the youth subsidy because I've had a few providers and people contact me wanting to know more about that. My understanding, and happy to be corrected by anyone from the department that might be online, but my understanding is the subsidy will be bring the rental income from a community housing provider up to the equivalent of an adult on JobSeeker. So I'm sure you already know this, but if you're under 22 and you're on JobSeeker, you get about $100 less a fortnight in your income. So therefore your the rental income from a young person in social housing is lower. So the youth subsidy will bring the rental return for a community housing provider up to the equivalent of that of an adult on JobSeeker, as I understand it. There may be some slight nuances to that I'm not across, but that's the kind of basic approach that's being taken. The other thing in relation to rent parity, as I said, there's going to be work with the sector to look at the implementation of that. It's obviously, it will affect different tenants in community housing differently. And some tenants will be hardly affected and others it'll have a bigger impact. So there needs to be work done to work through the detail of how and when that's implemented. I've had a couple of conversations with community housing providers in recent weeks who are really keen to know the time frame for that, because it could, because they've been working on bids or on proposals for quick starts or half, and they said, if there's a new rental rate that we can build into our calculations, then that can potentially make our proposals look more attractive. But I think it's too early for that. Thanks, Murray. Yeah, I don't. Definitely too early for that at this point. So there's work to be done there, and hopefully the sector. Well, I know the sector will have an opportunity to have some input into that. Other areas of interest. So that's the rental subsidy, the youth the rent parity, the youth subsidy. Is there anything else I know that I should tell you? I don't think so at this point. I'm happy to open it up to Fiona, or if Mark is here, if there's any additional comments they want to make before I open it up to the floor. Really keen to hear people's feedback and take any questions.
We don't yet have Mark, Annemaree, and I noticed Fiona just jumped off before, so
okay, no problems. Just me then.
It's just you.
I can say whatever I like.
That's exactly right, but also too interesting to see if anybody else has any other perspectives. Welcome, Judy. I've seen you've just jumped in as well, so even your perspective, Rachel. Not to throw to you on the spot, but in terms of sort of your initial thoughts coming from Victoria and now sort of working in this landscape, is there anything initially you've had a chance to read over that sparks an interest?
I think the youth subsidy thing's a really interesting point. I did some work with Melbourne City Mission when I was in Melbourne, and now they're a specialist youth. They have a focus on youth, and that's the gap between the rents received from young people and other people on job seeker is enough to really make it difficult for social housing projects to stack up. So I think if that can be worked through quickly and effectively, that could make a big difference to young people getting housed. And it also makes a big difference to, I think, individual community housing providers being able to, I suppose, maybe help people on their housing journey from the start, or and I guess have a greater intake of young people as well. So that's one of the things that struck me from the strategy. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Right, okay. You're all happy with the plan?
This is pretty CHP adjacent, but I'm really interested in that $350 million to incentivize infill close to underutilized infrastructure. We've been getting a lot of calls to Community Housing Futures recently about people that maybe have a bit of land, or they want to build a couple of extra stories on their commercial building. And these projects aren't really big enough to bring on a CHP. And I'm really curious about whether you think that tenant might be sort of support those people that are just sort of wanting to do this goodwill development but don't really know which pathways to take with it.
Oh, look, I don't have any detail, I'm afraid, Louise, about that commitment at this stage. I mean, it's a good point that you make. I do think that there should be opportunities there to capitalise on some of those local situations. And certainly when I was in far north Queensland earlier this year, or last year now, there's definitely opportunities where there's local landholders that are looking to work with CHPs to deliver some more supply. So I think anything that enables that is going to be very welcome. But yeah, I don't have any detail at this stage.
Yeah. Got Patricia with a hand up.
Hi, thanks. I do have some questions, Annemaree. I'm not certain whether you'll have the answers, but
Probably
there's
not.
a lot in here I'd really be keen to get some questions around.
Yep.
One of them is the short-term rental registration scheme. Do you have any details on what that is?
No.
No? Okay.
That's the short answer. I mean, to be frank, I think some of the detail is still being finalised in government. So until they've done that, it's going to be a bit light on detail around some of these initiatives. But I'm happy to take note of the ones that you're keen to get more detail about, because I can definitely feed that back. Yep.
The other is the critical response teams to all areas. Has there been any indication like where they will be, where they will sit, are they planning on them coming outside of regional areas?
You mean outside 2 regional areas, or?
Yeah, outside of example, are they going to be your bigger bases like Mackay, Rocky, Townsville,
Cairns, yeah.
yeah, those places?
I don't know, and I don't know if they have identified those areas. My understanding is that those critical response teams, they refer to teams that exist within the department's housing service centre. Yeah. So I don't know, but I can let the department know that we're keen to hear about that. I did have a conversation with a Queensland CHP at the Affordable Housing Conference in Melbourne 2 weeks ago, who was a little unhappy about the recruitment of additional staff in the housing service centres, frontline teams, simply because the pay rate being offered was making it hard to be competitive as a regional community housing provider also looking for staff, which is something that hadn't occurred to me, but was definitely an interesting bit of feedback. Anyway, more questions, Trish, fire away.
I do. Thank you very much for the work that everyone's been doing on the rent parity. That's really very important. So I just want to acknowledge the work that, you've all done towards that for us. We really appreciate it. The youth housing subsidy is something that's quite exciting because it's certainly an issue for us up here in our rural areas with the youth. And, it is can be very difficult, to be perfectly honest, sometimes to house somebody on a youth allowance unless you've got support and you've got some funding dollars around that.
Yeah.
So I think that's very exciting. What else did I look at? The DV shelters, they're talking about new, and I'm just wondering whether they're planning on new DV shelters, or are they just looking at perhaps upgrading in the same areas?
Well, the language in the report says new and upgraded, or new and or upgraded. So I suspect it's a combination of the two. Again, I don't have any information about the targeting in terms of locations for that. I imagine that's going to be, a response to areas of identified demand. But I'm definitely happy to take back a query around, when will we know what those locations are? Yeah.
That's about it for me. Thank you.
Right.
Also,
Thanks, Trish.
too, Trish, from my perspective, I think also around it mentioning young people around the domestic and family violence response stuff too. And we know obviously the immediate housing response for families, but also the supported accommodation sites for families too, and those that are presenting as younger couples or just couples in general. When I read over the report, that was one thing that stood out to me. And I know even Annemaree, from your background with your last role too, that's something that I think we've needed for so long. And so to see that, it'll be interesting to Trish, to see in terms of those sites, which we know will most likely be dependent on demand. Really interested to see what that looks like. I thought that was quite an interesting and really overdue addition. So,
thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments from people? Okay, so I'm going to pose a question to you then. If there's an opportunity for community housing sector to have input into finalising some of the parameters of these commitments and the implementation, it's probably not going to be possible for everybody to have input into that. It'll probably be channeled through the peaks, I imagine, and maybe some other representatives from the sector. But it would be good to understand people's interests in the areas of those, or which of those commitments you are particularly interested in having some input into. I mean, I can pick out the top ones for me, but they're going to be a bit different for everyone depending on where you're located in Queensland and the kind of nature of work your organisation's involved in. So, do people have any comment to make about that and the things that they're particularly interested in having input into?
Annemaree, it's Trisha again. I'm happy to just have a chat. We've got our regional reps meeting up here next week, and would that could also be an opportunity to, this is part of the agenda item, is to ask and put it out to the regional networks to make certain that they're all aware of it? And are they perhaps willing to have a collaborative approach to input on some of these important issues?
I think that'd be great. I mean, if there's existing mechanisms that we can use, I think that's fantastic. And, I can't make commitments on the behalf of the department in terms of what elements of the plan they are seeking or input about. We need to have some further conversations with them to clarify that. But yeah, I agree. If there's existing networks out there in the regions and across Queensland, Trish, it'd be great to just make use of those, because I know how busy everybody is.
Thanks.
Yep.
There is, Anne-Marie, too, just one comment that Rachel Hornsby's popped in the chat, which I'm not sure if you've seen just yet, but that's essentially the short-term rental registration might be similar to what we've seen in other states to try and manage the growth in short stay like Airbnb. There is a feeling that properties are being taken out of long-term housing and into short stay, affecting the private rental market. Local councils have been putting in place responses, but a move to statewide registration system would make it consistent.
Yeah,
so I just wanted to bring that forward
that's
for
right,
those.
Rachel. And certainly in the brief conversation I had with the department about that, very brief, is because there was a report delivered by University of Queensland last year, which basically said the short-term rental market wasn't a big contributor to the housing crisis in Queensland. I think people were surprised by that. It's probably the best way to put it. And there's certainly been plenty of other reports and evidence that indicate that it does. So I think this is a step by the state government to at least try and capture and register the extent of the short-term rental properties in Queensland as a starting point to, for further consideration about action in that space.
Just a quick question for me, and it's really great that we've got Anne-Marie here too. Just in terms of the feeling the pulse at the moment and knowing the Homes for Queenslanders plan, is there anything in terms of future sessions and planning for what we could seek to do a presentation on, get a guest speaker in, or kind of do a bit more of a deep dive around, just from the people that's online? Is there anything that you sort of go, and it may not even be specific to, this plan, but is there anything that we can sort of look in the next quarter period to go, look, this would be really interesting and something that CHPs here in Queensland would really benefit knowing the current landscape and what we have to work with?
I think they're all asleep, Murray.
And also we've got a great question from Sunil in the chat as well. So what specific measures will be implemented to ensure that the 1 million new homes targeted by 2046 is achieved, considering the collaboration required among government, the private sector and the community sector? How do these measures address the challenges in building sector to expedite the process of constructing new homes?
Oh, that's 3 questions at least. Look, the short answer is what measures will be implemented to ensure the target is achieved. I can't answer that on behalf of the government, but I imagine they are going to have regular reporting and monitoring on how well they're tracking towards that target. What that looks like, I think we're yet to find out. And how does it address the challenges in the building sector? Well, it does talk in one of the elements, Sunil, about expanding the construction workforce. They also talk about, the use of modern methods of construction. So I think there's a few things in here that are not my area of expertise when it comes to construction industry workforce, but I think they're attempting to address that, but I'm sure people from the construction industry would say there's more to be done. And I know that Fiona spoke at a forum around this topic just a week or 2 ago in Brisbane. So I know it's a priority, and I've certainly heard plenty of people from the construction industry and representative organisations talking about this. So I think the Queensland government is looking to pull whatever lever they can to make it happen. Not sure if that answered your question, but that's all I know.
I think you did well, Annemaree, given.
Thanks. Yeah.
Well, what we might do, just in being conscious of everybody's time and how busy things are at the moment, we'll wrap up today's session. But you can, on our Community Housing Futures website, find our details to be in touch. You can also reach out directly to CHIA, to Annemaree, or to any of our peaks too, for some more specific information. And just watch this space, because this sort of was a bit of an opportunity for us to get together and start some of these conversations just post the announcement of the plan. But like Annemaree said, there'll be more opportunities, and even Trish, like what you've mentioned, you know, you've got your standing community mechanisms around regional reps and stuff like that. So really keen to have some of that information fed back to. So if there's no other final comments from anybody, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you, Annemaree, for giving that overview, and I look forward to seeing you all again online for our next one.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Eloise.
Thanks.
Bye.